Welcome everyone to episode 11 of ZeeMee's So Hot Right Now, the show that's focused on bringing you the hottest topics, asking the burning questions, and fanning the flames for teams, tools, and individuals in the higher ed space that are on fire right now. I'm your host, Soup Campbell, Head of Community Experience at ZeeMee, the hottest social app and platform for colleges, universities, and students. Today's topic is the class of 2029 has entered the chat. As we begin to make that shift where we focus back towards the top of the funnel, the next recruiting class that we've got to focus in on, we're going to unpack some strategies, some insights, maybe talk a little bit about the nuance of that transition to the new recruitment cycle. But first, all of you that are watching today, please jump into that chat. You all know we always want you to introduce yourself in the chat. Maybe today, not only introduce yourself in the chat, but maybe you could also tell us a song that just invokes summer feelings for you. I know earlier today I was listening to the Fresh Prince, DJ Jazzy Jeff, Summertime a little bit. So like maybe if you got a song that just makes you feel like summer, drop that in the chat as you introduce yourself. And then stick around at the end. We're always going to try to make time for some Q&A. But with that, let's turn up the heat. It's time to meet our special guest today. I'm super excited. Two individuals that we're going to have with us. We're going to be able to share a lot of unique knowledge and insight. So first up, we have Mike Cohen, who is the Associate Vice President for Enrollment at Lake Forest College, and Mateo Remsberg, the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management and the Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions. Man, that's a long title, at Ohio University. Great to have both of you joining us today and look forward to today's conversation. Before we just really dive in and start chatting on the topics, and Mike, we can start with you. Just briefly introduce yourself, tell everyone who you are, a little bit about your role there, and maybe today I would love for each of you to tell me very briefly how you got your start in higher ed.
Yeah, well, thanks, Soup, and thanks everyone for being here today. So, as Soup said, I'm Mike Cohen. I'm the Associate Vice President for Enrollment at Lake Forest College, small liberal arts college, just outside of Chicago, Illinois. I've been here for almost a decade, and part of my portfolio, in addition to overseeing admissions and kind of everything under that umbrella, is I also operate many aspects of the planning for the long-term strategic planning of the college. So that falls under my portfolio as well in terms of both short-term and long-term planning. Never thought 15 years ago this is where I would be. I got into enrollment management because I had graduated at Miami University, and Mateo and I worked that out earlier, so we're good. And so, ultimately it was the recession. I had transferred from one school to Miami, and I had remembered my experience there. I had worked in the admissions office and in student affairs, and thought, I'd like to be a part of kind of making this better for other transfer students. And so, the one job offer I got out of college during the recession was to stay at Miami and work there, and I've been in higher ed ever since. So I'm very pleased to be here today and appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you.
Love it. Thank you, Mike.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mateo Remsberg, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management and Executive Director of Undergraduate Admissions. And yes, Soup, that is a long title. I'm super happy to be here. I have been in the field now 28 years. Reflecting back on that, I have been here at Ohio. Next week is my 3-year anniversary. So super excited to be celebrating that. My experience includes working at a couple small private colleges and universities in the Kansas City area, 19 years at my alma mater, the University of Utah, prior to coming to Ohio. So I've been doing this for a while. I can say that my introduction to enrollment admissions, I was one of those tour guides doing data entry, stuffing letters way back in the day when we, still did that. Here I am today. My purview currently, I oversee all of our undergraduate, domestic, and international admissions processing and recruitment for our 6 campuses here. It's both our main Athens campus here in Athens, Ohio, as well as our 5 regional campuses. And then we manage all the processing for our online programs as well. So I also have campus visits, admissions operations, and of course, all the recruitment, which includes staff on our Athens campus. Some of those are embedded in our academic colleges, our 5 regional campuses, and then we also have market-based recruiters out across the country. So, and I will also add that my song for summertime is Celebration by Cool.
Oh, yes. Good choice. Good choice. Mike, do you have one?
I'm not going to lie. At this point, it's whatever my kids are listening to.
Yes, I'm the same.
Let's be honest about this.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you both for introducing yourselves. So we're going to kick things off today just kind of at a high level, right? Like we know, traditionally there's some aspect of kind of making a transition, from one recruiting class to the next. But before we go into these first questions, Claudia, if you would mind, I've got a poll for the audience. I would actually like to gather a little bit of information from everyone watching today. And so I was just curious, is your institution right now still actively recruiting students for this current incoming class? I thought that would be very interesting to just get a sense of where we are in the summer right now, and if we are still actively trying to recruit and bring in students for this incoming class. And as I'm looking at the results, it's quite a few are saying yes. Yeah, maybe kind of around that 75 to 25 yes and no. So awesome. Thanks everyone for participating there. Yeah, I thought that's super interesting and really doesn't necessarily surprise me. I think when I see those results, I think many schools, until, as I like to say, kind of sometimes butts are in the seats, recruiting can still be going on for that class. I think there's a handful of schools out there that don't necessarily have to maybe worry about that, but the vast majority of us do. So great. Thank you all for participating in that one. So let's dive into this first question. And I want, Mateo, we'll start with you here. But each of you, I'd love to get your insights on this one and just walk us through at a high level kind of what it looks like for you and your team when we get to this part of the summer. And I know this one's a little bit different than most summers, but typically what it looks like for you and your team as you start to make that transition. Like what are, just at a high level, what are things that happen? Mateo, you can kick us off.
Sure. We usually start, we like to start in spring. This year we're pushed back a little bit more, just, as with everyone else, things have been a little different this year. We like to start out by kind of assessing current state. And so one of the ways that we approach this is having conversations within our smaller teams and the larger team as a whole. Talk about, what are the wins that we had this last year? So what are the things that we hope to recreate as we move into this next year? Where are those missed opportunities that we had? And then what are the pain points? What are the things that maybe we should rethink? And just kind of thinking through how things went this past cycle as we begin to prepare for the next cycle. From there, you're continually looking at data and saying where are we up? Where are we down? What were the results of our visits? What trends do we see? And then we start doing our planning. And so our teams right now at the territory manager level, they're working on writing their recruitment plan. So here's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen this next year, what my plan is. And then that just kind of continues to go up the chain. Our area leaders will take those individual plans and kind of find the key themes and put together kind of a unit plan. And that just kind of continues to go. Of course, those don't ever get fully finalized, and it's a living document, we say, and it's going to continue to be tweaked. And until we actually know what the class looks like at census, it's hard to finalize anything. Right. But we also then start shifting to our training over the summer, and what are the new things we need to train on, or what's the refresher training that we have to have just as we get ready for this next cycle.
I love that. And Mike, before you answer that same question, I'll go over to you, Mike. Like, is summer, I mean, it's been since 2018, I was on your side of the desk doing this. And so is summer, and Mike, you can answer this, like still a time when we try to get some of that staff kind of development or training? Is that still something that typically happens for you all?
We try to when we can, but the reality is that it's been a long time since this has gone from that 9-month, hey, if you make your class in May, you know, back in July, now we'll get back into the flow. That's been gone for a while. I think for us, you know, it's who's our staff going to be next year? I mean, we've been really fortunate, like Forrest, that we've had a lot of stability, but it hits everybody. And this year we got hit with, you know, people making changes. And so you're trying to train the staff you have while at the same time bringing on new staff and putting people in different roles. I think that piece of it, I think when I talk to other enrollment leaders as well, that piece of it, I think we're all experiencing, right, to some extent. And I think what we've tried to do is in some ways identify what do we need to be doing throughout the year so that it's no longer part of the transition. It's just baked into the culture of how we train people. So our professional development, our training really is a 12-month process now, because whereas we could have trained people over the summer, we need to be training people all year so that if your visit event coordinator leaves, we've got somebody in the fold they already know how to do it. They were the number 2 in that role and they can slide into that position because we've got summer visit days, whether there's a visit coordinator here or not. So I think that 12-month aspect has shifted the way that we transition. Instead of kind of that wholesale, we're done with this year, we move into next year. It's much more of a tasked approach whereby, you know, as Mateo said, we want to start in spring as well, because ultimately when spring break hits, students are visiting colleges, whether you're ready for them or not, they're coming.
Right.
And so for us, it's thinking about how do we alleviate within the staffing structure where we have a couple of people who can really focus on spring while we're finishing that class. And then based on what the model looks like over the summer, then transition the other pieces of the operation so that the system can run itself. The staffing can feed into the system, and then you always have people that can then train it if they have to train it very, very quickly. So we've really, I think, with this year model where this transition date no longer seems to exist, had to operationalize, and there's been some pros and cons with that. I think with our staff, the pro is, hey, we're going to do professional development training all year. I think the con is you got to be prepared to lose somebody in July and still be ready to go in August and September travel.
Yeah, seriously, I mean, I do not see how you guys do it. I think, like, you know, that challenge alone of just, you know, experiencing turnover and having to replace staff members is tough, right? And I think traditionally in higher ed too, oftentimes it's a slow process in higher ed. I don't know if there's ways we could, you know, work to expedite how we bring in new staff members, but you know, that process can, you can all summer long, we're just interviewing and investing time in that. So that's definitely a challenge. Just out of curiosity, I think maybe back in the day, years ago, if we did have to pick a date where we could say like, okay, this is like, if we had to put a date to like where we flip a switch, maybe it was when the application goes live for that next class. So Mateo, I'm curious, and I want both of you, is your application for the next class live yet? If not, what's the date that you all do it? And maybe everybody in the audience could pop in and drop that information too. I'm just curious today when schools are going live with their application for the next class.
Yeah, we typically look at an August 1 launch for our application for the next cycle. And part of that is helpful because we also just need some time. Like one of the things my application management team is working on is just our annual updates. What are the things, again, what do we need to change on the application, major changes, that have occurred over the past year, those types of things. So it's nice to have kind of that set time frame of early August to launch it. It gives us some time over the late spring, early summer to make those updates and changes that need to happen.
Great. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, so August 1 is typically what we announce as our application date being on the Common App and obviously having to make those updates. We do have an institutional app, though, that we open mid-May. And the reason we do that is if we have students who are ready to go through the process or at least want to get the application in, We don't necessarily want them to have to wait all the way until August, especially if they're not necessarily going to utilize the Common App to apply. To be perfectly transparent, it's not something where all of a sudden we're going to see 300 applications, between May 15th and August 1, but we'd like to have that option for students that if they've been engaging in the process for a while and they want to take that step, we have the ability to allow them to take that step. They're still going to have to wait, right? Because their schools aren't ready to get transcripts. They haven't finished the 6th semester, things like that, but at least gives them the opportunity to apply if they'd like to. So we do have that institutional app that opens in mid-May.
Yeah, I actually love that, right? Because we know, every year there's a handful of that high school junior class that was very much eager, ahead of the game, very proactive and going through the process. And clearly many of those students may already be zeroed in. Like, I know it's this school. This is my number one school. And so, maybe giving them that opportunity right there out of the gate before they really get into summer and things they kind of check out. That's kind of probably a smart tactic. I like that a lot. Okay, so we talked about, you already kind of introed, like the next question I have, both of you have already kind of touched on a little bit. The challenges of overlapping classes, right? The challenges. So the one that you've already mentioned is, again, just staffing things and replacing folks and getting new, team, members trained and up and running. What else, if you had to think about maybe some of the other challenges with that, what comes to mind? Mike, I'll stay with you and we'll jump back over to Mateo.
Yeah, I think with a school like ours, that's a little bit smaller, that tries to interview as many students as we can, is when we have junior students who are ready to interview and go through that process and want the time and attention that the senior students need because they need to finish their process, trying to have the bandwidth to be able to cover all of that can get really challenging. If we're working with a student, especially early on in a normal year, let alone this FAFSA year, right, where they really want to spend a half an hour, 45 minutes talking about their process, which is something that we normally do as part of our admissions process. Being able to meet them where they're at while at the same time help them understand we're focused on, getting 250 more students to enroll by May 1st. That can be a really difficult part of the early transition. As far as the summer transition, quite frankly, it's just making sure that you're double checking all the rules and everything in the CRM, and making sure that if there are changes or institutional updates or scholarship changes, or you've got not even in admissions, but new staffing in your business office or in your residence life office, to make sure that the information stays fresh and up to date and all those connections exist. Because I think that ultimately, at least for an institution like ours, and I would imagine for all of us, right, everybody who's here, you want to be authentic to the admissions process, being authentic to the process they'll have when they're at your campus for 4 years. And so there's a lot of work that goes into it. And I think that's the unseen part of the summer transition sometimes, right? You hope students never see it because that means you've done it right. But there's a lot of work that goes into it. And that can be a really challenging part of the summer process. Yeah.
Mateo, what about you?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Mike has said. It is a challenge, and particularly I think about a year like this year where everything was backed up, right? Our normal timelines got thrown out the window a long time ago, and so our team is still very much working to bring in this year's class, and probably harder than we've had to work for the past couple of years. At the same time, trying to prepare and write those recruitment plans and do that training and get those annual updates done, and we've tried to be intentional with our team to say, all right, we just need to set aside some intentional time that we're going to focus on the next cycle in planning. And so for example, we just brought in all of our folks, even everyone that's remote, for a couple day training. And honestly, we had an all team meeting, and it was the first time since I've been here that I've seen the vast majority, other than a couple people that were sick and a couple people that were out at different, business trips and things like that. Everyone, all of our remote folks were in one place for a team meeting, and that was phenomenal. But again, the focus really was on, okay, how do we start preparing for the next cycle and being intentional about that? Of course, we still were trying to, it was right during VSO, our orientation. And so we still had some team members in the morning that had to focus on that, right? But we're finding that if we're not intentional about how we schedule our time and think about, okay, now we're going to start working or thinking for this next 2 hours on the next class, the next cycle, then it kind of gets pushed back to the back.
Wow. Yeah, definitely could see that being a challenge. Mateo, I'll stay with you here. And I think both of you, especially with the positions you have in your current roles, can really like speak to this. How do you find that balance, right? Between, in every year, there's immediate success we need to have when we bring in a class, right? Like we all know that, those of us that have worked in this space, we need to make our class. But then at the same time, we're trying to balance that of kind of being in the trenches in the moment with that class. But then there's these higher level, maybe institutional goals coming from the cabinet, coming from, the president, where we're trying to look big picture 5 years down the road with things that are coming that we know are going to be facing us. How do the two of you navigate that and balance that of kind of being in the now, but at the same time, we can't be so buried in the weeds. We do have to have that head up, seeing the bigger picture. Is that tough to do, or what tips? I mean, a lot of people that are on and watching today are probably looking at their screen like, yes, help us understand how we might be able to navigate that better. But Mateo, I'll stay with you and then kind of come back to Mike, but I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And this is where, having some sort of an institutional strategic enrollment plan is helpful, right? That kind of lays out, here's what we're looking to do over the next, 1, 3, 5 years, whatever that looks like. At Ohio, we're in this really kind of interesting but also exciting phase. We have a new president. Dr. Lori Stewart-Gonzalez joined us a year ago. And one of her first things that she did is kicked off this university dynamic strategy process where over the past year, she's pulled together some teams and really thinking strategically about the institution and what are the pillars we're going to kind of hang our hat on. And we've got a new mission statement, a new vision statement. And, so it's setting that foundation for, what those next few years are going to look like, right? And our enrollment plan will roll up into the institutional dynamic strategy plan. So being able, this is the first time I've been at an institution where we're at it at the ground level, and that's exciting to me, and the energy that is happening around our campus. A big component though of being able to balance that, the immediacy as well as that long-term piece, is really centers around communication, and up and down and across and in all ways of, okay, what are we doing now? And, what are the needs? What are the challenges that we're having as an institution? And, finding different ways that we can communicate. I mentioned our recruitment plan, and I'm excited about this because it's been a while since we've had something that we can really look to say, here's our plan for this next year. And it allows us to be more proactive than reactive. It also creates this opportunity for us to share that out so folks have more confidence in what we're doing. And no, yes, we are visiting schools, we are going to college fairs, but also here are the unique things that we're doing. How are we leveraging technology, those types of things. When I first got here, one of the things that we started was a university recruitment council, and we meet 3 times a year, and it's a way to share out to whoever wants to come. They can come and hear, what are we doing from a recruitment and marketing and outreach side of things to bring in the class. And then it's also this opportunity to share, and this is how it connects, to the larger goals of the institution and what we're trying to do, and how this connects with the retention efforts, on the academic side of the house and the student affairs and those types of things. Our vice president for enrollment management also has a SEM advisory group that has like deans and key leadership and administration from around the campus to continue to share information out and get feedback in. So that communication piece is I think, just core and fundamental to being able to balance that micro and macro.
Yeah, I love that. Definitely makes sense. Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, we're in a similar position to what Mateo just talked about. Dr. Jill Barron became our president a couple of years back. She's laid out our Forest Your Future as kind of that vision for the college, and the reality is how everything is integrated, and that obviously includes enrollment, and enrollment's a big part of that. And I think that one of the things that we've always been focused on philosophically is that retention and graduation starts with enrollment. If you admit students that are unlikely to retain and graduate, even if that's your short-term goal is just to get students in, if you can't retain them and graduate them, it's a losing proposition. And so one of the things we've spent quite a bit of time on in the last few years is really identifying and understanding who our students are, who is successful here. We took a data-based approach to figuring out who we enroll, when we enroll them, what that looks like, what some of those likely challenges might be as we enroll students, and are we set up to ensure that we can work with students on these? Or are there things that we need to take a deeper look at? Do there need to be more resources towards it? Are we trying to recruit or enroll populations that ultimately we may not be the best place for them, and that's okay. We can be okay with that. And so I think that for us, that has allowed us to, in many ways, kind of build, as we build enrollment goals, kind of 3 to 5 years out, understanding that things are going to happen, right? Understanding that programs might come online, or sports might come online, or things could be sunset. It's just you never know what's going to happen year over year. But what you do know is if 3 to 5 years out, this is kind of how we're hoping enrollment takes shape. If we can build our short-term goals to meet those 3 to 5 year long-term goals, now we're being proactive, right? Now we're able to say, okay, this is the plan, and trying to then evaluate, are we sticking to the plan like this year where we all had to make changes based on the FAFSA, but understanding that kind of here's what we can expect, right? The predictive analytics aspect of things and what that means in terms of what we're seeing in the data, and building it so that the short-term goals get you to the longer term goals. And that's really kind of the approach that we've taken and have allowed us to stay on course.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And actually a great transition kind of into the next topic or theme I wanted to dive into a little bit, which really is just talking about, like Mike, you mentioned, one of the keys is just knowing who our students are, like the right student for us. And so I want to spend like a few minutes just talking about lead generation. Okay. Back when I was doing it, it was still very much, who do you purchase your names from? How many do you need to purchase to load up at the top of the funnel? And you just work that list, and based on previous year's data, you're probably going to trickle down ultimately and have the class you need. The more I've been talking to folks about that, the more I'm hearing and starting to feel like that traditional funnel model is changing, and maybe not necessarily just the way it's done today or is going to need to be done in the future. So I want to just talk a little bit about lead generation, how we start to generate the leads for the next recruiting classes. And I've got a poll, though, that I want to ask. I'm going to just have Claudia throw in one more poll here for the audience. So I'm curious, kind of thinking about lead generation, and if you're somewhat familiar with how your team does it there, how confident are you that your institution's current lead generation strategy is going to be effective in the coming years? I'm really, really curious just to get folks' thoughts on this one. And as they're coming in, I expected this one maybe to be kind of across the board. We've got folks that are, not confident at all. We've got a percentage there that's completely confident. But then we've got a big chunk that's kind of in those middles, slightly confident, we're somewhat confident, fairly is pretty good. So that's encouraging to see that we do have, a good percentage there, fairly confident. And so, I think when we think about what we're doing today, I think it's good to think about, are those strategies going to be what's going to carry us through in the coming years as things continue to change. So I want to talk a little bit about lead generation. Mateo, we'll kick you off. We'll kick this first question off with you. What are the primary channels or methods that you and your team currently use for lead gen? Just like how does it work for you guys?
I imagine that we're probably not any different than 90%, 99% of the schools out there, right? Like, we're licensing names. We are partnering with, the third-party partners that, operate the college search sites and things like that. For what I would consider, those, the colder leads, if you will, the prospects, right? And then, as we look at what we might consider inquiries, it's your traditional website RFI, request for information, who's coming to our events and college fairs and high school visits, and those types of activities. We're doing a little more with digital marketing and social media, looking for other sources. And it's, I was having a conversation with a colleague about this, and we continue to assess and look and say, okay, are we focusing in the right areas, or even looking at our other strategies? And it's in some ways, I think, like, licensing names is one of those things that is maybe something we have to do. It may not be the most effective, but I was looking at some of our numbers in terms of, we're seeing fewer students at college fairs and at high school visits, right? And so it's that notion of how do you get in front of people, just even to build that awareness, that you exist, right? And I think, as you think about direct admission, like, part of my question around direct admission is, like, this just the new lead generation?
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of folks, might say, I know I just went through this process with my youngest son, who was a high school senior that just graduated this year. And I'm trying to leverage everything, buddy. I've got his account set up on niche, I'm like everything I can find. And so, I think it was neat seeing, even through like a niche, some of the direct admission. Ultimately, those schools ended up not being ones that he was interested in, but still, I think it allowed him to see and maybe discover a new school that maybe he didn't know about or wasn't on his radar. So I think exploring some of those opportunities certainly can help. Mike, to tie into that question, how are we qualifying these leads today? And again, this ties back into you kind of saying, like, we know who our students are. So again, if it's just something where, we're just licensing names, but has it gotten better over the years through some of the sources where we can do that licensing to really fine tune and within those names that we're licensing, how are we qualifying or selecting ones that we already think probably fit us, and that's who we want to try to reach out to, that's who we want to market to?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I was just laughing hearing Mateo talk, because I feel like we could switch chairs, right? We'd be having the same conversation, because I had this conversation a week ago, right? And then the question around direct admission of would we have seen these students anyway? We just didn't know we were going to see them, because they would have been stealth apps through the Common App. It's just that they got our conditional offer, and so they're, I think as far as qualified leads and what that looks like, I think it's really trying to figure out what the engagement looks like once the lead comes in. I think we're able to track that so much better now, right? I think when we look at all the data that we have in the CRM, when we look at any third parties that we work with, we know which third parties that provide lead generation or where they come in through our website. We know what's more effective and what's not, right? And so that's always the question about search, is that it scares me to not search. So just because the idea that there are students that we will not be able to get exposed to, at least we think so, because how else are they going to find our name unless, right, we send them something and they go, oh, I got an email from this school, I'm going to look at it. But the reality is, we also know that probably, like many people here, you can search a whole bunch of 1,000 names and only get a few leads back in a particular territory. So for us, it's kind of that trying to identify what the engagement looks like and how the students utilize that. We are always trying to meet students where they're at. And so if we find certain areas within our structure of lead generation where students seem to be gravitating towards, what resources, what opportunities, what marketing can we push into those to see, is this just enhanced for this year? Is this something we're seeing trends in? Do we need to try to think differently about this? Versus here's how many dollars we have to spend on lead generation. How do we split this out? So I think the ability for us to be able to track, and not just the enrollments. I think one of the things that we talked about as a team was we measure everything by who enrolled through lead gen, but the reality is if lead gen got them to visit campus, at some point it's on us and our team to make sure that we enroll them. So then this broader question of what does conversion for lead generation actually mean? Because if the goal is to get them engaged with the campus and visit, that's a very different number than the amount of students who might enroll. And so then trying to take a look at what we're using for lead generation and what we deem success, because lead generation for search may look different than lead generation for niche or lead generation for ZeeMee or lead generation off the website. So also trying to find the nuance within that is a big part of kind of how we talk about lead generation.
Yeah, I love that. Such great information. And it kind of makes me think too, like one of the things you said, Mike, kind of struck me. Like I can remember back in the day, like, again, you would find certain like almost like watering holes, right? Like, oh, this particular high school, these past 7 years, like something's really happening there. There's kind of a pipeline from that high school. So like, we're really going to invest and work time there. And now there's just different watering holes, different places. Like, niche could be a watering hole, like ZeeMee with all these kids there could be a watering hole. So it's like, yeah, still knowing where are these unique pipelines that we can kind of focus in and tap into is interesting to me, just how it's changed, how technology, digital communities, things like that have really changed where you can get access to students today. So appreciate both of you guys sharing that. This one I'm just going to let either one of you jump in first if you've got something you can share here. I'd love to just maybe an example or two of some type of successful lead gen campaign, something you did that you feel like we're proud of this. This was like a campaign that we initiated that worked well for us from a lead gen standpoint. If you've got any examples there, I would love to hear it.
So as I think about this question, we've used lead generation as like when we're licensing names, for example, we're seeing, organic growth out of a particular market, in part of the country. And so what if we layer in and start, licensing names in that market to continue to build some of that name recognition? And, we've seen some growth in that in particular markets, I think about Colorado as one of those for us. And so then kind of the next step of that strategy was, all right, we see organic growth. What happens if we start, trying to build more of a presence through that, the name licensing? But then what happens if we see success with that? Now what happens if we put somebody in that market, right? Yeah. And I think that's, this whole conversation about lead generation, and I really appreciate what Mike was talking about is, going out and buying a name or licensing a name. Like if your intent is to do that just to build enrollment, like you're probably not going to see the return that you're looking for. But everything that we do is layered, and it's a cumulative effect on what we do. And so, that licensing of names or, partnering with niche or whatever is like, how do we introduce ourselves to a student? And hopefully we do that well. But then it really comes back to, okay, how do we continue to build that relationship and continue to engage the student? Like if it's a one and done, you're not going to be successful. So I really appreciate Mike's, comment about that whole piece of being intentional, how you use that, and really what are the different ways that you measure that.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I love, again, the mention of just the relationship building aspect of this, right? I think, one of the things I love, and those of you all out there that know me, I love technology, I love innovation, and we have such amazing technology like at our fingertips now, right? And it's helping us do things more efficient and smart. And then sometimes though, I look and I worry like, but with all that, are we getting a little further away from like that actual relationship building with students? And I think this generation of prospective students, I mean, that's what they're craving. That's what they want. They want to know like, oh my gosh, this is the one school, this admission counselor, like I know them, and like I've got this connection, and that's powerful for me. And so I think that actually is a good lead in to kind of talking a little bit about some of this technology that we have at our fingertips now. Mateo and I, Mike, I don't know if you fall into this category or not. I know Mateo and I, are old enough. We remember life before CRMs and
Oh yeah.
when everything was file folders, and like we remember that life. And luckily, like we have amazing CRMs now and amazing technology. So I would like to talk a little bit, and Mike, you can kick us off here. What are some of the maybe emerging technologies or even some of the tools that you're using right now that just really are helping you and your team in your recruitment efforts? I'd just love to know like what you're tapping into.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it does. It ties into what you just mentioned. Philosophically, technology can't recruit for us, right? There are some who might try, but our philosophy is technology can't recruit for us. Technology should complement our ability to recruit better, right? What can technology do for us to allow our recruiters to spend more time building relationships and be stronger recruiters, right? And so for us, it's really identifying, starting with that CRM, how can we figure out where a student is at in the funnel, in the process, and what information we need to deliver to the student so that they can build that relationship with the institution and with us. So if I know, for example, that I can send a report to any of our recruitment staff that helps them understand who has visited in the last 7 days, who has applied in the last 3 days, who do we need to get back to, and simply, what might be their areas of concern through RFIs or through forms. We can better recruit students by leveraging the technology we have. We're not using AI to then respond to the question. We're not using AI to then design some sort of email chain, right, that can get 95% of it answered. And if there's an additional question, then maybe they'll email us back. We're using that technology to really allow us to better pinpoint what student needs are, and then have the recruiter reach out to the student to talk to them about their needs and how we get them connected. And so whether it is through the CRM, whether it's digitally, whether it's through, we've done that with good success with ZeeMee, with other third party, but especially kind of our students operate quite a bit on ZeeMee, and being able to then have them bring back those questions to counselors who can say, hey, I was talking to a student. I'm glad you built this connection with X student. They let me know about this concern, and they said you'd be a good person to talk to them about this, right? Because now you're triangulating the relationship and broadening out the student's relationship with the institution. So we really try to, and anytime we're looking at a new technology tool, we don't focus on how the technology, or I should say, we don't solely focus on how the technology will make our operation more efficient. It has to do more than that. It has to make us better recruiters. It has to make us help build better relationships with students for us to use it. Because ultimately, you're right. The number one thing we hear from students is they want to get their information when they want it, right? As opposed to us cold calling them like we did 15 years ago. But when they want their information and when they want to talk to a person, they want to talk to a person, and they want to feel like that person cares about them. And so the technology allows us to really bring in that information to be able to help a student not only get what they need, but help us show how we're going to care about them when they're here.
Gosh, that's so good. There were so many things. When I go back and watch the recording, I'll have to go back to watch it to write down some quotes from you, Mike. Really good stuff there. I'm sure everybody, again, that's the audience is like, oh my gosh, this is such good stuff. Mateo, transition from that into I want to talk just briefly as we're getting close here on time, but I do want to talk a little bit about the evolution of kind of predictive modeling and analytics. Okay, again, back when I was doing it, it was still very much those traditional variables, when we're trying to do predictive modeling, distance or zip code, has visited or hasn't visited, family, socioeconomics, like historical history from that high school. Like that's just how, we had to do it back in the day. I feel like now there's so many more ways with really cool ways to do some analysis and predictive modeling. Mateo, what have you seen change here in recent years? What are you and your team leaning in on when it comes to maybe some of that predictive analytical stuff?
Sure. I think to some extent, how we did it back in the day, we're still doing. It's just the amount of data that we're putting into the model to help predict has grown fairly exponentially, right?
Right.
So, when I first started, it was like you said, did they visit? Did they apply? Were they admit? Like those key milestones. But, now we're at the point with our CRMs where I can see if you've opened an email and how many times you've opened an email, right? Which is a little bit scary, but yeah. So we're feeding more data in, and I think that helps in getting back to, how do we use that data? How do we provide that data to our staff so that they can use it in an actionable way to build those relationships and target in on the needs of how do we best serve our students, right? And so, we're now doing some more enhanced scoring of, who's more likely to apply. When you're dealing with as many students as we have in our funnel, like we've got to have a way to narrow that down. And so by being able to do some lead scoring, or, how likely are they to confirm or deposit or actually enroll, like at different parts of the funnel, different times of the year, we use that to help us just, where do we focus our efforts, right? I think that the interesting component of this, that's probably more, within the past handful of years, is now we've got tools that can say, well, what if I do this? What might be the impact, right? We didn't have that back in the day. And I think, that's something that I know I can lean into a little bit better and am looking to do so. But I think there's a lot of promise in that, as particularly as we look at, what happens if we only had, 5 open houses versus 7? Right. And helping to think around strategy and actually implementation of tactics and things like that I think will help us as we continue to plan and move through, the next several years.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think and we're not going to spend time on it in this episode, but I think the introduction of AI in our space and what may be possible there. And that's actually what our next episode, we're going to kind of spend more time talking about. But I think that's what gets me excited about AI. And again, like if we have all this data, can something help it make it smart for us, decipher it all and give us action. Like I think the last school where I was a dean of admissions, I literally can remember coming in and my president basically just, hey, call these 500 students. Just they're 500 students that have been at, call them, like just get them on the phone. It was just like the big cast the wide net. And how much more powerful would it have been to say, hey, if you can talk to these 17, like the information we know that if you can just talk to these 17, you can get them across the line. Like these are 17 that are right there. Just this next kind of connection with them will kind of move them. So I think that's the kind of exciting stuff to help, maximize our time, the bandwidth that we have is where this technology I think can really help us. Okay, we got to do this because as always, there's always more questions I want to ask, but the hour goes by so fast. And we've got to get to my favorite segment of the show. All of you watching know we have our segment that's called Gas or Splash, and I've got some good ones to throw out this episode. And so my guests today, they have no idea. They don't know what I'm getting ready to say. They are only going to respond with gas. They love it. Or splash. They want to douse and put that thing out with water. They don't love it. And so I'm going to start. We're just going to go Mateo, Mike every time here. All right. The first one. Bronny James signing with the Lakers.
Splash.
Splash.
I love it. Yes, and everybody in the audience, go. You guys can participate too. All right. This one, let's see what you guys think about this one. Breakdancing as the new Paris 2024 Olympic sport.
Gas.
Gas.
Let's go. That's what I'm talking about. Let's bring it back. Love some breakdancing. All right, this one, I don't know. This one may be a little too controversial, but I decided this one was on me. I voted to make sure we throw this one in, so we'll see what you guys say. Trump versus Biden in a golf match.
Splash.
Splash.
Oh, well, come on, you guys.
I don't want to see that.
I want to see it. I need to see that golf match. All right. We can splash that one. This one's just kind of a normal. We'll see what you guys think. 7-Eleven free Slurpee day.
Gas.
Splash.
Love it.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a 7-Eleven in years.
Oh, Mike is splashing the free Slurpees. Oh man. All right. Gas or splash, summer heat waves.
Splash.
Splash.
Yeah, I'm over it. I'm in Southern Indiana. It has been brutal. I'm already ready for fall. Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders new Netflix show.
Splash. I didn't even know it was a thing.
I'm right there with you. I splashed. I didn't know that was a thing.
You don't lie. Don't lie to me, Mateo. I know, you're gonna be checking that out. We wanna see what this show's gonna be all about. All right, I'll let you guys splash that one. Let's just do one more, and I feel like I almost represent this one today. The Wimbledon tennis tournament.
Gas.
Gas.
Gosh, I love Wimbledon. Yes, let's go. I see the audience is getting in on this too. Awesome. Love that. All right, we did great. We do have a few minutes left, so I definitely want to make sure anyone out in the audience, if you have questions that you'd love to ask Mateo or Mike while we have you before we let everybody go, feel free. I'm going to see if this is where Claudia usually lets me know if anybody did have any questions for the panelists today. Let's see. Claudia is saying all clear. You all didn't have any questions today. That's okay because they did such an amazing job providing all of the amazing information. Yeah, so let's just wrap up. First, I always like to say thanks everybody that showed up and took time out of your day. We know how busy you are. I'm still amazed in July here that this many people would sign on and want to hang out with us for an hour. Definitely want to thank Mateo and Mike. The two of you were phenomenal today. I have literally got to go back and watch the recording. Both of you said things that I want to quote, that I want to write down, share out. I just really appreciate you guys sharing your wisdom and insights with us. We always hope this is a show that just helps all of us. We're trying to lift each other up. Higher ed is not easy. There are always challenges, but it's an incredible, caring industry. And I think if we all work together, we're going to make a bright future for higher ed and for students. Real quick, as we do wrap up, Mateo, Mike, I'll start with you, Mateo. How can folks stay connected with you if they want to reach out outside of here? What's the best way for them to connect with you?
Sure. So they can reach me at my email or I'm on LinkedIn. And I'm just going to drop those into the chat. So you have those, but feel free to reach out. Happy to chat with folks, share ideas. Let me pick your brain as well. And Mike, thank you so much. It was great meeting you. And again, I'm going to have to go back and re-listen because there were definitely some nuggets I want to pull from your experience.
Thank you, Mateo. Mike, how can we stay in contact with you?
Yeah, and thanks to everybody here, Mateo. Likewise, I could say the same thing back at you. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you and get to do this with you. I'll put my email in. This is.
Oh, Mike froze for me. Maybe it's just me.
No, he froze.
Oh, Mike, that's all right. Was he able to get he got it in? he got his email in the chat in time. I do know Mike is on LinkedIn.
Oh, I got back.
He's back.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
Yeah. Well, the joke was that I told him this has been happening. We got some construction. We made it almost all the way through. But yeah, so email is the best way. I do have a LinkedIn. I made it a long time ago, and it doesn't say I work here. So good luck finding it. But if you find it, I'm happy to connect with you.
Awesome. And thank you for that, Mike. And just to remind everyone, this is one of the episodes where we are following up a week from now. Members of our partner success team are going to take this same topic and really dive in much deeper in more of a workshop strategy session. This is definitely for any of you out there that are current ZeeMee partner members that just want to know how you can tap in more and lean in on this and maybe leverage that platform. So be on the lookout for the invites for that. I think that's going to be a great workshop with our team. Also, next episode of ZeeMee's So Hot Right Now will be a really interesting one. All we're talking about lately in higher ed is AI, but I think we might be the first ones that ask students what they think about all this stuff and what students feel about how colleges and universities are going to start implementing and using AI in this process. You are going to want to see what these students have to say about this stuff. I've been looking at some of the results and a lot of it has shocked me. So I want to share that with the community and just talk through some of those things. So definitely we look forward to seeing you back and joining us next month. So with that, we will wrap up. I can't believe it. I'm 4 minutes ahead of time. You all that know me know I never do that. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you spending time with us today. Thank you again, Mateo, Mike, Claudia in the background on my team, making sure everything works smooth. Thank you all. Hope you're having a great summer, and we'll see you back here next time for So Hot Right Now. Bye, y'all.
See y'all.
Again next month for our next episode. So we'll see you all. Thanks for joining. Bye.